Hello and welcome to another episode of the podcast. So, I was just working away on some client protocols and I was inspired to jump on and record an episode here because there is something that is getting missed time and time again in ladies, and I don't know why. I really don't understand why this is missed so often. And it's thyroid. It's a sluggish thyroid, and in midlife, it becomes a lot more rampant. There's a lot more women who can struggle with their thyroid in midlife. Hormones are changing. Our progesterone, in particular, is dropping. The thyroid loves progesterone, so it really is a time when thyroid health can take a little bit of a nosedive. So it's a very, very important topic that we have to talk about. So in this episode, I want to talk to you about the symptoms of hypothyroidism, because trust me, if you have like two or more of these symptoms and you're in midlife, like, I don't know, 35 onward, you probably do have a sluggish thyroid to one degree or another. And then I want to talk a little bit about thyroid labs as well. So, first things first, what are the symptoms to think about when it comes to a sluggish thyroid? So if you're constipated, this is a big one. But you don't have to be constipated. None of these are symptoms that you have to have hypothyroidism, but constipation is a big one, especially if you have constipation that really isn't alleviated by you've tried like a bunch of different things. But constipation is a big one. Hair loss is a big one. Eyebrow loss, feeling cold all the time. So if you notice that people around you don't seem to be as cold as you, if you always need to close windows, turn on the heating, if your extremities get really cold, your hands, your feet, you're always trying to warm up, you just can't get them warm, that's a sign of this sluggish thyroid, because when you have hypothyroidism or a sluggish thyroid, it slows everything down. So your circulation in your body has slowed. And then that also means that you could have a low libido. A lot of women in midlife, they just think, I have a low libido, I need testosterone. Au contraire, you might want to try you're looking at your thyroid first and foremost before running to testosterone. It's not to say that you don't need testosterone, but really think about the thyroid. So low libido is a big one if you're struggling with hypothyroidism. Then we have got dry skin. We've got bloating. A lot of hypothyroid ladies have SIBO. So if you're somebody who's been chasing your tail with SIBO, but your practitioner or practitioners have never looked at your thyroid, then that's where you need to go. You need to check that box whether you've got it or not. You need to figure it out, because again, the thyroid, when it's sluggish, will slow everything down and you'll get slow motility. And then this can end up looking like bloating in your GI tract and SIBO sometimes. Brain fog is a big one. Right, brain fog, and also similarly low mood, and they can often go hand in hand, right? So if you're feeling depressed, if you're feeling down, that's a very big symptom of hypothyroidism. And then fatigue, right? Fatigue is like a classic sign of hypothyroidism. If you wake up in the morning and you feel like you did not sleep, I see this a lot in my hypothyroid clients, right? They wake up and they feel like they could go straight back to sleep again. That's usually a thyroid issue. And then the last symptom would be weight loss resistance, right? Weight gain, but you truly are doing everything. Like you've counted your calories, you're doing the weightlifting, you're getting the 10,000 steps in, you're not over consuming, pastries and cookies, etc., right? Then that can be a symptom. You don't always have to have that weight gain though, right? So let's say you were like, wow, I have got two of those symptoms quite severely. It's time to look at that thyroid. Now, you might say, I have already looked at my thyroid. I've already had my thyroid labs done. I've already had my doctor run them, or another functional practitioner. I know functional practitioners who do not run the right thyroid labs and don't even know how to interpret them when they run the ones that they run. So just be very cautious, because if you're that person going, yeah, I have some of those symptoms, but I have had my thyroid bloods run and I've been told everything's normal, be very careful with who you're working with. You really do need to ensure that this person understands thyroid health. How do you do that? I don't know. I mean, you're here, you're listening to this podcast. I think that's a great first start. Maybe you'll glean some things from this episode and you'll realize that your practitioner doesn't understand the thyroid. So, first of all, what is a full thyroid panel? So, it consists of TSH, free T4, free T3, reverse T3, and thyroid antibodies. Now, that's a full thyroid panel. You don't have to, and so if you're looking at your labs, and you should always get a copy of your labs. If you're the person who allows your doctor to tell you everything's normal and you never research yourself, look at your numbers yourself, then I'm sorry, but you're never going to get the health results that you want. You need to be an advocate for your own health. You need to be the person who nobody will care about your health more than you. So you need to get a copy of your labs. Ring up the lab, ring up your receptionist at your doctor's office and say, I would like a copy, please send to me. And they will email it through. They're your labs. You need to keep these forever. And you need to look for trends, okay? Let me also be very clear. I speak out a lot about hormone testing in midlife, in perimenopause. That's for the sex hormones, estrogen and progesterone. Thyroid is different. You need to test your thyroid. And you want to see these trends. I think it's very important to always look for trends. But we can see if you have a thyroid issue looking at these thyroid labs, pretty quickly if we know what we're looking for. So you get your full thyroid panel. Now, you don't always have to continuously run your antibodies. That's interesting. And yes, depending on how high they are, you want to get them down and work with somebody on that for sure. But what you have to keep running is your TSH, free T4, free T3, and reverse T3. You can't stop running those for markers. And a good practitioner who truly does understand the thyroid will be able to look at these from a functional optimal range and determine what's going on with your thyroid health. Functional optimal means that we put you in a prevention category. Our ranges are a lot more narrow than the allopathic medical ranges. The allopathic medical ranges are very broad and they're sometimes quite nonsensical because you can be fine at a 5 and fine at 200. It's ridiculous. And they're based on an average of the people who go to get their blood drawn at that particular lab. So you'll get different reference ranges depending on which lab you go to in your country and where you go. And so you don't want to be compared to an unhealthy population because that's who's getting their blood done, really. It's not healthy people. You want, what does the science say? What is the gold standard science, the randomized clinical trials? What are they saying about blood work and healthy people and disease, right? And that's what we have in the functional medicine space. You want to be in that narrower range, which is putting you in the prevention category. So that's what we aim for. So first of all, is your doctor looking at the functional optimal range? And I know functional medicine doctors who do not do this. I don't know why. I don't understand it. So TSH, for example, is optimal at about 1.5. Listen, we want to keep it under 2, but about 1.5 is really ideal. And so if you're over 2, let alone over 3 or more, that's a red flag, okay? But honestly, you can have a TSH that looks really good and you can have low free T3, low free T4, high reverse T3 antibodies. That's why it doesn't work to just get TSH done. And you will know if your practitioner is no good at thyroid health if they only run TSH or if they only run TSH and T4. So you want to look at the TSH, then you want to look at the T4. That's inactive thyroid hormone. T4 is inactive thyroid hormone. And then the T4 has to be converted into T3. T3 is active thyroid hormone. You want to look at both of these, though. It's important to look at both of these. Then you've got reverse T3. And reverse T3 is inactive. It's an inactive metabolite of T4. And it kind of like stands at the cell door and says to T3, the active thyroid hormone. Let me just explain what active means. So when you have your hair loss and your fatigue and your weight gain and your depression and your low mood and your constipation, your coldness and your low libido, that's because you haven't got enough T3 inside the cell at the cellular level. And T3 is the biological active thyroid hormone. So you can have tons of T4, but if you're not converting it into T3, or if you have a blockade at the cell because of too much reverse T3, then you're going to get those symptoms, right? You could even in your bloods have high T4, high T3, But if you've got a blockade at the cellular level because of high reverse T3, it's not getting in and you've got your hypothyroid symptoms. So this is where, again, your practitioner has to know how to read these thyroid labs, because if they're only doing TSH, T4, and T3 and all of them look really good, they're going to say your thyroid's fine, but you have all these symptoms and they haven't tested your reverse T3, right? And reverse T3 stands at the cell door and says, go away, T3, don't want you in here, T3. And then you've got this issue at the cellular level, right? This blocking of that active T3 at the receptor level. And hormones, I've spoken about this before, but hormone health isn't just about the amount of hormone in your blood, it's about your hormone receptors, be it estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, thyroid, it's about those receptors. Is the hormone getting to the receptor, getting in, doing its job? Because if not, doesn't matter how much is in the blood. Doesn't matter. Now, things that are going to elevate reverse T3, which we don't want that elevated reverse T3 because then you're going to feel like crap. Stress and inflammation are big ones. There's other things too, right? Illness as well, or maybe too much T4 medication. So that's really important to understand. You've always got to work on stress. You've always got to work on inflammation. And as we age, our inflammation increases. I just did an Instagram post about this. We have studies on this. We call it inflammaging. And so you need to work on inflammation. And that really comes down to your metabolic health and your gut health. Your gut's either driving inflammation or lowering your inflammation. So you've got to work on your inflammation to support your thyroid to reduce the reverse T3 so you can get your T3 into the cell to do its job. You've got to reduce your stress and you've got to think about your medication too. If you're on T4 only, that might be problematic. I also want to say that a good clinician will interpret your thyroid labs based on your health in the last 10 months or so, because COVID, the flu, illnesses, it can influence your blood patterns, and a practitioner really needs to know about that and be able to interpret that. It can influence your reverse T3, your antibodies, right? So all this has to be considered. There is also a ratio you can think about. I don't know if I'm going to get into that right now. It's a T3 to reverse T3 ratio that can be sometimes helpful, especially when considering your thyroid medication. Now, let's just talk about thyroid medication for a second. I have a lot of clients who come to me on Armour Thyroid or T4, and they've got tons of hypothyroid symptoms. And so sometimes what is needed is a switch up in the medication. I am not a doctor. I cannot prescribe medication. I will never tell you to go on something, to reduce or go off something, to increase. I will not do that. That's not my wheelhouse. What I do for my clients is I am this bridge between them and their practitioner, their prescribing practitioner. So when it comes to thyroid, I can interpret the labs if their provider isn't quite up to speed on their thyroid knowledge, and I'll give recommendations and suggestions that they then take to their provider and talk through with their provider. And so this has happened quite a lot. In the last week or so, I've had a couple of ladies, we've chatted, we can see that their reverse T3 is really high and they have these hypothyroid symptoms and they're both on T4 only meds, so that I've told them what I think's going on, given them that information, they've taken that to their doctors and their doctors have given some T3 and they're starting to feel better. So that is something that we can discuss if you're a client of mine, and I can bridge that gap between your doctor's knowledge of thyroid health and mine, and then you can be the interpreter and vouch for what you need and advocate for what you need when it comes to maybe a switch up in your medication, because that T4 only seldom works. Okay. So, yeah, we have to really consider that reverse T3. Crucial, crucial, crucial. If you don't have reverse T3 on your thyroid labs, you are not getting a full picture. You may continue to spin your wheels and struggle. It is a molecular break, so to speak, at that cellular level and at that receptor site. And it is making your biological active T3, which makes you feel good, removes your symptoms, it prevents it from getting in. So you don't want all this reverse T3. You need to find a way to lower that. And again, it comes down to stress, it comes down to inflammation, it comes down to your medication as well. So consider that. Listen, keep in mind, and I've said this before, but I really cannot say it enough, the serum thyroid hormone that you're looking at in blood, maybe even T3, the active thyroid hormone, it can be really high. It is not reflective of the intracellular thyroid activity. That's so important to understand. And that's where that reverse T3 comes into it. And this is just what I see women constantly spinning their wheels because they've got this cellular hypothyroidism, but their practitioner, their doctor doesn't understand it, isn't recognizing it, isn't running free reverse T3. I don't know. I don't know why. So if that's helpful, if you want my help with your thyroid health, I go beyond just reading your thyroid labs and giving you suggestions. I want to do the full gamut with you because you have a thyroid issue for a reason, and we've got to get to the bottom. And listen, it will always, and I'm very confident in saying always, come back to your gut health and your nutrient status to one degree or another. Always, especially in midlife, when we've been on this planet for decades and we've suffered a lot of assaults in those decades. So, yeah, our gut health has taken a toll. And yeah, our stress has been high at times, and that's taken a toll on our thyroid. And yeah, our sex hormones are fluctuating and our progesterone's lowering. All of these things are assaulting our thyroid. So we need to, midlife is a time when we can't just read a thyroid panel and take medication, because you might feel a bit better for that medication, sure, but you want to make sure you're doing everything you can to protect that thyroid long term. So that's reducing inflammation. That will be the gut. It comes down to the gut. Okay. Yeah, maybe if you're living in mold or whatever, you've got to deal with that. But really, at the end of the day, your gut is either driving inflammation or lowering it. And that's very simple understanding when you understand why. There's bacteria that make byproducts. And if you have too much of the bacteria that make the inflammatory byproducts, you'll have too much inflammation. If you have too much of the bacteria that make the anti-inflammatory byproducts, you'll have lower inflammation, right? But we got to balance the dysbiosis, the bacteria in your gut, to support those byproducts. So you bring down the inflammatory byproducts and bring up the anti-inflammatory byproducts. So your gut health does need to be addressed. There will be stuff to be addressed. That'll go a long way for overall health, not just thyroid health. But your thyroid loves minerals, all kinds of minerals. It loves iron, and you probably don't have a deficiency of iron if you think you're anemic. That's a whole nother topic I'm going to go into. You probably have trapped iron, and taking iron is probably a very bad idea for most people. But your thyroid loves iron, your thyroid loves copper, and so many people are deficient in copper. Your thyroid loves magnesium, your thyroid loves selenium, but many people aren't deficient in selenium, but that's what you hear about. You don't hear about copper, you hear about selenium. Most people should not take selenium. You really have to be careful. Most people take iron, most people take selenium, most people don't need iron, most people don't need selenium, and they can make matters worse, not better. Most people need copper, don't take copper. Most people don't need as much zinc as they're taking, and they're taking tons of zinc and it's knocking out their copper. Minerals are delicate, and too many people are self-supplementing, causing a lot more damage, and they're not getting better, and they wonder why. It's because you need to work with somebody who really understands this stuff and is a true professional at what they do. So if you want my assistance, the best thing to do would be to book in for a 30-minute consultation with me. That's a great place to start. The link is in the show notes. Go there, book a consultation. We can chat. You can bring me your labs. We can look at your bloods. We can talk all things thyroid health. And I would suggest that is the best way to start out with me. All right. Well, thanks for listening. I hope it was informative. As always, share this podcast out. Make sure that you are subscribed. Share it to your friends, to your family members, because there are so many women struggling with a thyroid issue, and they truly don't have to. Thanks for listening. I am not a medical professional, and the information provided in this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. I do not have access to your individual medical history or circumstances, so the content discussed here should not be considered as medical advice. Before making any changes to your diet, lifestyle, or considering the use of supplements, please consult with a qualified healthcare professional or your doctor to ensure it's safe and appropriate for your specific situation. Any decisions you make based on the content of this podcast are at your own discretion and risk. Thank you for tuning in.